Hey guys, we're right here smack dab in the middle of our second chapter already. It's amazing how time flies. This week we'll be talking a little bit about more about agreement. There are lots of different types of adjectives. Remember, adjectives are things that describe things. But some adjectives have some special characteristics. And we're going to look at a couple of those today, along with a host of new vocabulary words and maybe some phrases. We have some sample sentences that show how those get used. And we'll put that all together for you in a relatively short lesson right here. Remember, what we do on this screencast is a much more condensed version of what we talk about during class. So what might take us only between, say, 7, 8, 10 minutes, in some cases as much as 15, that could take us close to a class period sometimes, the way that we stretch things out and the way we practice things out verbally. So be used to that. Remember, you can pause it whenever you like. And if this generates more questions for you come class time, feel free to jot them down and bring them my way. That's the intent. If you're viewing this just because you missed class on a Monday or Tuesday, that's fine too. You could still generate those questions and you can throw them at me via email, or you can, of course, do so in person, or give me a call on our school phone as well. So that being said, let's go ahead and begin. Vocabulario 2.2, section 2.2, the second subchapter of chapter 2. Let's begin. Describing contents of a bedroom. El armario. Oops, there we go. El armario is, we would call that a closet. Some people would refer to that as the term armoire, which is more of a standalone closet. It's like a closet that's in a big box as well. Sometimes referred to as a wardrobe too, but we're going to just use the term closet. El armario. La cama, the bed. La cama. El cartel is a poster. El cartel. I'm sorry, it's the poster because el is the. Now this is interesting. All four of these little versions of this word are really the same word. It's the word cuanto. And cuanto means how much or how many of something. But this particular type of question word, like an adjective, needs to agree in gender and number with what it's asking about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But there are four forms of it: cuanto, cuanta, cuantos, and cuantas. They're all technically the same word that asks how much or how many of something. El cuarto is the room or bedroom. El escritorio is the desk. El escritorio. I is an interesting word. It can mean there is, there are, is there, or are there. I can mean four different things. There is, there are, is there, and are there. And you can know which one of them it means dependent on the context in which it's used. So if I say, for example, hay tres carteles, I'm saying there are 3 posters. But if I were to say, for example, ¿cuántos carteles hay? How many, because I use the word cuanto, posters, because I use the word carteles, hay. You know it mean are there, because you're asking a question. ¿Cuántos carteles hay? How many posters are there? So in one case it can mean there are, in the other case it can mean are there, dependent on its context. Continuing on, la lámpara is the lamp. La lámpara. La mesa is the desk. La mesa. Mi is my or mine. Me. Mucho, mucha, muchos, and muchas are an awful lot like cuanto, cuanta, cuantos, and cuantas, because they both have a similar ending, the o, a, os, as ending. In this case, yes, it has to agree with whatever word it is referring to. So if you're saying a lot of people, you'd say mucha gente. If you're saying a lot of books, it would be muchos libros. If you want to say, for example, many things, it would be muchas cosas. So the word mucho must always agree in gender and number with whatever it modifies. Mucho and cuanto, very similar words in that regard, even though they're used in different ways. One asks a question, one is more of an adjective. La puerta, the door. La puerta. Question phrase, K-I-N. What is there in, or what are there in? Obviously, you would complete the sentence afterward. K-I-N. La radio, an exception to our rule of Masculine versus feminine. Notice that it ends in an O, but it's still la radio. So normally that would be considered a masculine word. Now, I think it's probably short for radio onda, which means radio wave. Excuse me. And so that's why it's la radio instead of el radio. But that would be considered an exception to our normal rule. And la radio is a radio, as it looks like. So yes, it's a cognate. El reloj is a watch or clock. El reloj. La revista is a magazine. La revista. La ropa is the clothing. La ropa. La silla, the chair. La silla. Su can mean either his or hers or theirs, depending on its context. There would be contextual clues that would help you. So if we're talking about a person, let's say I'm talking about a person named David, I say, ¿Dónde está David? He's, él está en casa, he's at home. Es su mochila, is that his backpack? We knew it was a his because we were already talking about David. So there are context clues that help you to understand when su refers to his, hers, or theirs. El televisor, the television. El televisor. Tener means to have. Tener. Tiene can mean either he has or she has. Tiene. Tienes, you have. Tienes. Notice that, that tiene and tienes are both different forms of the verb tener. We'll be talking more about that in class. Tu is yours. Now notice it doesn't have an accent. Usually when it has an accent, that means you, like you informal. But this tu does not have an accent. So it is a possessive adjective. It means yours. La ventana, the window. La ventana, like the word vent or ventilation. Los zapatos, shoes. The shoes. Los zapatos. Las zapatillas de tenis, tennis shoes. Las zapatillas de tenis. Up here are a few words or, some sample sentences, frases de ejemplo. To find out what there is in someone's room, ask, and here are a few possible questions. ¿Qué hay en tu cuarto? What is there in your room? Or what's in your room? Another example. ¿Qué hay en el cuarto de Paco? What is there in the room of Paco? Or more anglicized, what's in Paco's room? ¿Tienes un televisor? Do you have a TV? ¿Qué tiene en su cuarto? What does she have in her room? ¿Qué tiene en su cuarto? Some responses to those questions. So here is a response. This one actually is in response to this one. This responds to this. This responds to this. And the last one responds to this. Okay, so anyways, next one. Hay libros en su cuarto. There are books in his room. Or there are books in Paco's room. No, no tengo televisor. No, I don't have a TV. And the last one, Merche tiene unos carteles y una radio en su cuarto. Merche is a person's name, like Marsha or something. Merche has some posters and a radio in her room. Merche has some posters and a radio in her room. And the Merche refers to the su from up here as well. Very good. So that's just that's what you would see on our vocab sheet that we would look at within the first several minutes of class. Up here, or I'm sorry, over here, we have all of our vocabulary that we're focusing in on for section 2.2 or for this week. And over here is our one big slide of new information that we have for this week. I'll move this around in a moment so you can read everything. But agreement of cuanto and mucho. So we talked about this a little bit already. Cuanto asks how much or how many of something, and mucho says a lot of something. And even though one asks the question and one kind of gives the answer, they both really are used the same way. They must always agree in both gender and number with whatever it is they're talking about. So if I say, how many students are there? I'd say, ¿cuántos estudiantes hay? But if I say, for example, how many folders are there? I'd say, ¿cuántas carpetas hay? So I'm making it agree in gender in that case. And when I respond by saying a lot of something, the same will occur. Hay muchos estudiantes, or hay muchas carpetas. So hopefully that clears things up, or starts to clear it a little bit. Number one, many nouns and adjectives have the following endings. O, a, os, or as. That's just very common for most nouns. Making the endings of the adjectives and nouns match each other is called agreement in gender and number. So there's usually, not always, but usually 4 ways you can make something agree. Gender is making it agree in masculine versus feminine, and number makes it a matchup via, or it makes it match up with singular and plural. So there's always a masculine singular, masculine plural, feminine singular, and feminine plural. So there's always 4 forms of things. There are some cases where that's not the case, but usually there are. In the forms of cuanto, or the forms of cuanto, are used to ask how much or how many of something. Like adjectives, cuanto have to agree with the noun that it describes. So it modifies, describes, same thing. Example, ¿cuánto papel tienes? How much, how much paper do you have? ¿Cuántas carpetas? How many folders? Item number 3, the forms of mucho mean a lot or many. Mucho also has to agree with the noun that it describes. So, necesito muchas carpetas would mean I need a lot of folders. Or, tengo mucha tarea, I have a lot of homework. Now, if you wanted to get really, really grammatical about this, you could say, well, in this case, it is the feminine plural forms of adjective-noun agreement. And in this one, we have the feminine singular form of adjective-noun agreement because mucha matches with tarea. Singular, but still feminine. Those are some of the ideas that you'll see moving forward. And we're going to do that a lot this year. You get very used to it over time with lots of practice, and lots of practice we shall have. Speaking of which, I think you need to get to practice right now. Have a great day. We'll see you soon. Ciao.